Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Somehow, Jonna and Candace had gotten turned around and now were lost in the wilderness of the Wichita Mountains. They were supposed to be camping for Jonna's birthday, but they couldn't find their way to the campsite. They passed an old wooden sign that had a strange drawing of people standing in a circle holding hands and surrounding a buck with enormous antlers. Jonna said the sign meant they were getting close, but it made Candace feel like they didn't belong there. Just then, something rustled in the woods. Candace jumped, which made Jonna laugh. It was probably just a deer, Jonna explained. But that didn't make Candace feel any better. In fact, she felt like they were being watched. As the day slowly turned to night, they decided to set up their tent in a small clearing. They could look for the camping area with fresh eyes in the morning. Candace laid in the tent wide awake. She couldn't sleep, haunted by the feeling that something was out there watching them. Jonna laughed, saying there were lots of things out there. That's the beauty of the woods. Jonna suggested they go check out their surroundings to be sure there were no monsters. The two turned on their cell phone lights and peeked into the darkness outside their tent. And that's when they saw something. It looked like a person, but it didn't move. Jonna took a step closer despite Candace telling her not to. "It's just a scarecrow," Jonna laughed. Candace was relieved for the moment until she wondered why was there a scarecrow in the middle of the woods. As the two women got closer to investigate, they noticed something was off about the scarecrow. It looked too heavy, too real. Candace reached out and touched and felt something cold beneath the straw and sticks. Something dead. They screamed. It wasn't a scarecrow at all. It was a dead body stuffed with straw, and in the center of his chest was a heart-shaped hole. "We need to leave. Now," Jonna said, filled with fear. When they turned their lights on their campsite, they found a massive buck with huge antlers. Its eyes glowed from the light of their phones as it stared intently at the two women. "That's no ordinary buck. Run!" Jonna screamed just as the animal reared up on its hind legs, revealing a lanky humanoid body with a stag's head. Candace and Jonna ran for their lives through the woods as the deerman bellowed a horrible sound. They could hear it crashing through the woods behind them as they tried to escape. Candace suddenly ran into the dead man's scarecrow, and the women thought they were running in circles until they saw another scarecrow, and another, and yet another after that. They looked around to see they were surrounded by the scarecrow dead, all with heart-shaped holes in their chests. As the deermen emerged from the woods into the middle of the circle of dead, they realized this was just like the ominous wooden sign they saw earlier that day. Jonna looked at Candace tearfully and told her to go on without her, that she'd hold off the monster for as long as she could. Candace didn't want to leave her friend, but then the deerman was suddenly upon them, already with Jonna in its hands. Candace screamed and ran, but just as she was about to pass the scarecrows, they sprang to life and grabbed her, holding her tight in their grips. Behind her, she heard a guttural voice scream,
"Bring her to me."
The scarecrow shoved her back into the circle and onto the ground where Jonna was waiting with a bloody heart-shaped hole in her chest. The last thing that Candace saw was the gory face of the deerman as it plunged its maw into her flesh. The women's families eventually found the remains of their camp, ripped apart by what the authorities claimed were wild animals. But the people that lived in the surrounding areas knew that everyone that got lost in those woods in the Wichita Mountains eventually fell prey to the infamous deerman. Shania was a natural-born hustler. Once she knew there was money to be made, she couldn't stop until she got all of it. Unfortunately, she often did this at the expense of her family. This time, she'd realized she could make a profit by selling the clothes her sister had pushed farthest back in her closet. But things went too far when Shania decided she could get more selling the items her sister had just bought instead. Her parents were furious. They sent her to her uncle Kamal to work at his animal training center in Manitoba, Canada for the summer. Her parents hoped that if she learned to train animals, then maybe she would learn some discipline herself. Uncle Kamal's animal center, along with the usual training services, also took in previously wild and/or hurt animals. One large albino fox, named Cain, took a special liking to Shania. The large snow-white fox had 3 legs and beautiful amethyst eyes and followed her everywhere. Her uncle's home and training facility were surrounded by dense woods that were teeming with wildlife. But there was something about the woods that made Shania very uneasy. At night, she would hear the sounds of the animals and then sudden silence. When that happened, she'd frequently glimpse antlers slowly moving past her window in the distance. The white fox Cain began coming into her room at night to sleep on her bed. And while it was cute at first, it started to keep her up at night as he growled and barked at whatever was prowling outside. So, unable to find any lasting peace at her uncle's sanctuary, she returned to the thing she knew best: making money. She figured out that she could ask Uncle Kamal's clients to pay for their training sessions in cash, claim they had canceled the session, but actually reschedule them for after the summer. She'd then pocket that money. Soon, she'd amassed a tidy summer fortune, but she wanted more. Her usual greed was different here. It grew and permeated other parts of her life. She developed an insatiable appetite for meat. No matter how much she ate, the hunger only grew. One day soon after that, everything changed. Uncle Kamal was bitten by one of the dogs, and horrifyingly, the smell of his bloody wound was enticing to her. Upon realizing that, she was overcome with panic and fear. Terrified of her growing changes, she bolted to her room and searched the internet. She discovered the First Nations legend of the wendigo. A wendigo was an evil creature that slowly possessed the greedy, pushing them to revel in their greed and also cannibalistic desires. The curse of the wendigo was horrific indeed. Suddenly, she heard growling and looked up from her laptop to find Cain. When she reached out to pat him, he snapped at her before running away. Shania pursued Cain, but was stopped by her bandaged, limping uncle. With a stern and disappointed look, he told her he'd found out about all of her canceled clients. He'd called them, and they all told him a very different story from hers. Shania realized just how greedy she'd become, caught in this latest hustling scheme. Tears streamed down her cheeks and she ran off instead, deep into the woods. Something rustled in the bushes ahead of her. Cain emerged, aggressive and snarling. Every one of the fox's white hair stood on end as he growled. His amethyst-like eyes flared, and he leaped right at Shania. She screamed as Cain flew past her and attacked the antlered beast creeping up behind her. It was the wendigo. The gaunt, ash-gray-skinned creature's hide stretched taut over its tall, nearly skeletal frame, eyes deep in its sockets and stinking of death. It tried to throw the fox away with its antlered head, but Cain was too fast and continuously savaged the creature's throat and face. A very human-like scream ripped from its bloody, tattered lips as Cain continued his attack. Finally, the claws of the wendigo slashed into the fox, and as he yelped, Shania ran for her life. The screams of the creatures echoed behind her as she ran through the woods back towards her uncle's place. She thought the fox defending her might mean that there was still hope to free herself of the curse of the wendigo. But with every step, her greed and hunger grew. Her skin turned a mottled gray before her eyes as she felt antlers pushing to break free from her skull. and she had only one desire: to eat human flesh. She tried to resist, but she could smell her uncle's blood on the air. She heard a familiar growl and looked up to see the large, battle-worn albino fox, bathed in red from wendigo blood. As he leapt at her, fangs bared, Shania smiled in relief. Cain couldn't save her, but at least he'd save her uncle from her.
The hunting season was almost over, and the chill of winter had arrived. The huntsman was packing up his gear when he heard a rustling in the woods. He quietly moped deeper into the forest to see if he could make one last kill. He saw brown hair moving slowly between the trees. No doubt, a lone deer snacking on its last meal. The huntsman looked through the sight on his rifle, and he did a double take. That was no animal. It was a boy. "Hey!" he called through the trees. "What are you doing out here?" The boy took off further into the woods. The hunter ran after him. What was a child doing out here in the cold? He sped around the bend and grabbed the boy by the collar. The boy yelped. Now that they were face to face, he saw that the boy's eyes were filled with terror. His eyes welled up with tears, which turned to ice the moment they hit his cheeks. Gasping, the hunter realized exactly who the boy was. He had seen that face plastered all over the local newspapers and was posted in every ranger station. He had been missing for almost a year. "You're Anik?" the huntsman questioned. The boy looked blank. I don't know," he whispered. Hours later, the pair arrived back in the nearest town. Anik's family were overjoyed to have their son back. What a wonderful holiday gift. But the authorities needed to know more. After questioning Anik, they realized they were getting nowhere. They asked all the right questions. Did you run off? Were you taken? How did you survive the past year in the Arctic? But the boy shook his head, remembering nothing. Everyone was frustrated. They even accused the boy of lying. That's when the hunter stepped in again to defend the boy. "Everyone stop. His memory is gone. That's what happens when you're abducted by the Ijirak." The officer scoffed. "It's just an Inuit urban legend. They're not real." "Like hell they're not," the hunter said. He grabbed a pencil and paper and began to draw. It was a gruesome sketch of a creature whose eyes and mouth were sideways. When he held it up, the boy recalled and started to wail. There was no doubt he had seen the beast. As the hunter quickly packed his gear, he explained the Ijirak had been dwelling there in the Arctic from when there were still many rainforests. The home of the Ijirak is said to be cursed, and one will lose their way no matter how skilled or familiar they are with the land. It awaits anyone who passes by the woods, then launches in an attack. It targets children and kills them. The ones who are spared are cast back out into the wilderness, aimless and lost. Their memories are wiped clean. The officer pressed him. How could he possibly know all of that? The huntsman pulled down the collar of his shirt and revealed a deep scar across his body. He was once a boy that the Ijirak tried to kill. Possibly the only one who got away with his memories still intact. Walking through the snow later that day, delirious from lack of sleep, the huntsman called for the creature. "I know you're out here. Show yourself!" For endless days and freezing nights, he wandered through the woods trying to track the creature, plagued with flashbacks from when he was a boy, dragged by his hair by the beast as he dug his fingers into the ice to try to stop him, starting to run away, then being tossed at full speed into a tree. Finally, The beast raced toward him at full speed, with his sharp antlers piercing the boy's neck, dragging his horns down his chest. Suddenly, a moan startled the hunter from his memories and turned his sight towards the trees. He knew that sound well. He trained the weapon on the direction of the noise, and based on its cry, he knew he wounded it. As he crept closer, he saw the unmistakable red eyes looking at him from the ground, the ones that haunted his memory for all those years. He was about to land the fatal blow, but he stopped. His entire existence had been to hunt the enemy. If he killed the beast now, what would be the purpose of his life? Knowing the beast had a scare like his own, he walked confidently out of the woods. He was certain to return the following year, and the year after that. He realized he wasn't there for the kill, but for the thrill of the hunt, even if that meant that Ijirak wandered free, ready to take on another child at any time. Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.